All right, welcome to Culture Couch Live this week. As I normally say, every week's exciting, but we've got a new one of our new teammates come on today, Mark. But I'll get Murph. Emil, welcome to you.
G'day, Rosie. Cheers, Mark.
Good to see you all.
Hey, Rosie. Mark.
Yeah, Murph, why don't you do the introduction as you're more familiar with Mark and his journey, but maybe introduce Mark and he can tell us a bit about himself.
Yeah, Mark and I came across each other about 3 or 4 years ago. Mark had just finished up at the Melbourne Football Club, I think, and was working as a consultant. And we got to know Mark really well and worked closely with him and his team. And he's joined us. So I'll hand over to you, Mark, perhaps to give us a little bit of an intro into your journey and your background and the exciting career that you've had. It's fascinating.
Yeah, thanks, Jez, and good morning to Em and Rosie. Thanks for having me on today. It's an absolute pleasure to be not only here today, but part of the wider crew at Performance by Design. My journey's been a very interesting one. It's been certainly a diverse journey across multiple industries, but also multiple geographical locations. I've worked both in Australia and abroad. But I guess when I look back at it now, it's been shaped heavily by every single leader that I've been lucky enough to work with and work under. And that probably started really in my first corporate job. I had a leader who, I was very, very young, but certainly had an open door policy, very much empowered people to make decisions. But also the biggest piece I found there is a little bit of an old school leader in some ways, but it was don't come to me with a problem without a solution. And really that ability to think laterally, but also think about what you wanted from that person, value their time. And that was really a pretty strong introduction to what leadership represented. I'm talking your sort of early 20s, pretty wet behind the ears. You've come out of university, really raring to go in the corporate space. But that introduction to what leadership and probably managing people actually was a great one for me. And then I'll fast forward really until joining the Melbourne Football Club. Jez mentioned that at the top. That was a real eye-opener for me to probably understand what the corporate space was missing from a leadership perspective. It was rooted in purpose, values, and behaviours, as we know most football clubs are. But it was that extension of that framework into the admin department, and really it was a bit of a soft approach. I know you were there, Rosie. I just missed out on the tail end of your influence over the club, but when I joined, Peter Jackson was at the helm, and Simon Goodwin had just taken over. But particularly Peter Jackson, through a lot of the work he was doing, extended that notion of a culture code, I guess, into the admin department. But really, it was how it permeated through the organisation, how it was referenced with every single thing we did, and that was conversations in the hallways, that was formalised meetings, that was group whips sort of every week. It was absolutely everywhere was this reference point back to values. And for me, that was a big difference. I'd had some other good leaders throughout my journey and some leaders that I would say weren't sort of fitting the bill necessarily, but the framework, I guess, that the footy clubs actually presented me was instrumental. And I quickly learned that managing up was just as important as managing down. But then also for me as a leader, I had some great role models to look towards. And then when I started to manage people, when I first started at Melbourne Footy Club, I only had one direct report. But as that team continued to grow, I was able to then, I would say, practice my leadership skills, knowing that I had this backing of great leaders above me. And really that, again, that framework and that, I guess that systemized approach that we talk about all the time at PBD, and really the core of our business, was ever present there. And then, as Jez said, I met Jez, and we ended up doing some work together at a small gaming and esports startup that I ran, and we grew that from 3 to 23 staff. And instrumental in that growth was the PBD system, and the ability for not only from a retention perspective, but really in a recruitment perspective to go out and seek the right people, but do it with a values first approach. We very much led all our conversations with, this is who we are, not necessarily this is where we want to go, but this is who we are. Do you want to be a part of it? And gaming and esports at that time was still, and probably still is, somewhat a niche space. So for us, the ability to pick up staff and pick up team members really from alternate industries, or I should say aligned industries, so creative, lifestyle brands, these sort of spaces that people were, this is during COVID as well, people were getting paid quite well. People were working remotely. They had all the flexibility they needed. So to convince or to create an appetite for people to leave those jobs and come out of our organization, we really needed to stand for something. And that was really our pivotal point. So, my leadership's growth has been really an exciting journey to the point where I am now, and I can live and breathe the PBD system, and not only at work, but also in my personal life as well.
Fantastic.
What was the most confronting thing? Like you mentioned the corporate world, and I think we talk about it all the time at PBD, and I obviously lived and breathed footy for 40 years, but what was the most confronting thing about it? Did you find that you went home from work one day and went, wow, I never thought about that before, or gee, that's unbelievably different? Was there any one or two things that you found were just so dramatically different? They were almost like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, I reckon it was the notion of team. I think in the corporate space, you can feel isolated or even lonely, for want of a better phrase, and not necessarily inherent or have enough trust that everything you do will be backed up or followed through by your colleagues. I think that real notion of team and genuinely having people around you who are making decisions in the best interest of the organization. I think that was the biggest piece. And also that sense of belonging. I think it's very hard to create a sense of belonging, but once you do, and it's very possible in a corporate space, but once you do, then a lot of the pieces start to fall into place. And footy clubs do that very, very well.
Yeah. Where you with your Melbourne experience, you got to move into an organisation with a culture code and be a part of that, work your way into that system. As I understand it, when you worked with Jez at the esports company, you were part of the creation of your code and building out the system, eh? So, guys, I just got thinking about first time I started working with Jez in 2011 and being a participant, in it, and then getting to coach it now. Just give us some insights in that experience of actually now being the one to be in a system and then actually get to build the system. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it's a very different lens, I think, you take on things. When you're in a business, the business back to front, every single one of those employees. The ability to now step back and actually take a sort of an outsider's lens on it, but also it's a very rewarding piece to be able to take someone on the journey that I've been on.
Yeah,
and that's probably the most exciting piece for me, because I just know it works. I know that if people commit to this, I know that if people take a longer term view, that it will work. And the ability for me to be able to take other people on that journey, and whether it's me being a role model leader or whether it's just me being part of a cohort that again has seen some success off the back of it, is just really, really exciting. What does it mean from a technical point of view? Again, it's the ability to take people on that journey. We're not here to solve people's problems. Sorry, I shouldn't say solve people's problems. We're not here to give people answers to their challenges. What we want to do is to be able to take them on the same journey so that they can arrive at that point where they too understand how to create their own systemized approach to leadership and culture. And we know, again, I'll keep saying this, we just know it works, but people have to commit to it. So that's, it's been exciting. And I get to talk to you guys every day. There's a really rewarding piece in the back end there that we get some self-fulfillment out of everything we do every single day, which is, again, a pretty cool piece for me.
I think I'll just jump in there and talk a little bit about that. So Marc was probably the architect of probably some of the best values I've seen, where group. So, and we talk about teams creating values that are relevant to their industry or their organization, and the team and Marc created the values play, PLAY, and it just resonated with the group, and so then the whole group just pretty much bought into it, didn't they, Marc? And it was a really it was a great journey for the team. and the ownership of those values and the subsequent behaviours just meant that there was just a real collective of a group of people just moving forward in one direction. It was that was fantastic. So yeah, I don't know about the
Thanks,
Melbourne values and behaviours, Ruzi, although they seem to have paid off okay recently. But
yeah, seems to have worked.
but I do know that whatever Mark learned, he was able to put in place with the esports company.
Yeah, that's the question I was sort of trying to dig into. Yeah, he talked a lot about, briefly about if the code was put into everything, the whips, at Melbourne Footy Club. So then when you got to be because your experience was you watched it and got into a system and then you got to build your own system and now you're helping companies build. So in that middle step, what did you take from the Melbourne learnings into the team that you led with play that you learned through Peter Jackson and your time at Melbourne Footy Club?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece there was, and Jez hit the nail on the head, it was building it together.
Yeah.
This wasn't me being the architect. This was me asking the questions of the group. And it was so obvious when it got to the end. And it's not only that, play stood for passionate, limitless, authentic, and youthful. And you couldn't ask for 4 better words when you're looking at the full breadth of an organization that was targeting kids that are, not kids, but young adults that are 18 and 25-year-olds. But it was really that whole process was again, something that I'd learned and I'd seen happen at Melbourne. It probably wasn't as inclusive from a whole team, but when you've got 150 odd staff, including players, it's a little bit harder to do that. However, I was privy to the development of those, and then so for me, it was just it was trusting the process, and knowing that whatever came out at the other side was the wishes of the wider group. I could have come up with, or the executive team could have come up with a million different values and acronyms, but really it was that. What does the group see as the organisation? Because that's what we needed to push forward. The evolution of those values was that was the 3rd iteration over the course of the business, and I think the business was at that stage about 4 years old, and it was representative of not only where the company wanted to go, but it was representative of the people, and that's the biggest piece there. It was 100% representative of the people that were going to drive this organisation forward. What do they want? Where do they see the organisation now? Where do we want to get to? And that's. It was. We got to the end of it, and it was literally just sitting there in front of us, play, and then all the questions that we'd asked, all the behaviours were very, very obvious to sit forward. So don't want to discount the approach, but it was. What I'm trying to say is, if you ask the right questions and you involve the right people in the organisation, the culture code becomes very obvious on the other side.
Yeah.
I think, mate, you said something before which really resonated. I was on a webinar yesterday. Matthew McConaughey ran something that's really cool, and he had Tony Robbins and a number of other people on, and they talked about selling, and they talked about selling from a place of love, and it was really interesting because the 4 of us are here because we've been involved in the program. And maybe we take it for granted too much, but you said it, Mark, before, it works, and that's probably the frustration when we get off sales call for all 4 of us is, why don't they like it? But it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to sort of, if you haven't been involved in it, it's hard to get across the emotion that is part of building a culture code, creating an amazing culture. The most recent one we did, Emmy in America, was unbelievable. The feedback we got at the end is, you guys undersold your program. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, it's unbelievable. But it is hard to get it across, isn't it? But we're all here for the same reason, because we've all lived and breathed this program that we absolutely believe in.
Yeah, you make a great point. I was chatting to someone at the football on when was it, Monday night, and they'd just taken a new role. They're a project manager for a big construction company, been put in a new role based on their competence, not necessarily their ability to lead. And their one question was, if there was one thing that you could get me to do, what would it be? And this guy's a very high-level project manager. And I said, just put another line in your project management tool that says people. And if it's an hour a week, schedule it in. Just schedule it in. And I guarantee you'll see some change. And when you look at what we do, it's just the ability to get a taste of what change you can actually create by caring for your people. And once you get that taste, it becomes addictive, almost like anything.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Ruzi. If we could just get people to get
Yeah.
a taste of that, then this would be.
And I say this, Murph, all the time. You've heard me say, and I would never, not that I'm ever going to do it anyway, I would never take a coaching job without getting performance by design to come in. I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But it is hard to get across, Murph, isn't it? The impact of getting an external person to come in. It's really hard for some people to grab that for whatever reason it is. But it's that impactful, isn't it? Because it's not only, and maybe this is the point, Murph, you talk about it all the time. Maybe because it's as me as coach or me as CEO, I don't want to be accountable. But if I bring Murph in or Emil or Mark, geez, I'm actually going to have to be accountable to these behaviours, isn't it? Maybe there's a bit of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point to reflect on. I think because you have to become a bit vulnerable by saying I may not have all the answers, and so all of a sudden you become vulnerable as the leader. That's the first thing. The second thing, as you say, Ruzi, then you've got to be open to the feedback. And so some people aren't as open to feedback as you would hope. The third thing for me, which jumped out as you were chatting, Mark, is about trusting the process.
Yeah.
So as leaders, sometimes we want to manufacture an outcome or get to an endpoint, or we've got a preconceived idea in our head, and we're not prepared to follow the process to get to that outcome, because in case it isn't what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so as a result, we make a few little bits and pieces along the way. We have a chat with here or her or him or her, and all of a sudden you're sort of changing and everyone can see that.
Yeah.
Everyone says, "What are you doing? Like, we're meant to be doing this to get to there, and you've suddenly manipulated the process." So I think there's a few things that come into it along the way, and so it's about trusting the process and giving yourself to it, in the knowledge that when you get to the end, that the people that you lead will actually all want the same thing. They all want a workplace where we work together, we belong, we have a voice, we feel like we're developing. And so it is, I understand why it's difficult for leaders. Is it an excuse not to trust? I don't know. I don't know, because at the end of the day, the leader is the leader is the leader, and so they have to make their own choices. But I'm with you. I don't know why. I don't know why we undervalue it. That's probably my biggest thing. Like we spend so much money on marketing. We spend so much money on but we forget about that our business is only our people. And Neil Baum's probably the best of that. Without your people, what have you got?
Yeah.
I think the other thing to ask Mark is, like, how often does trust come up? Trust. What does that mean to you, Mark? I only ask you directly. Like, what does trust mean to you? Because we probably rolls off the tongue now so easily, but we probably don't even stop and go, what is trust? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's 100%. I don't want to chuck another word in there, but faith that whoever it is that you trust or they trust you has got your back. Yeah, they whatever they're doing, they put you first. And I used this analogy the other day, and I don't know if this is right, but I still like it. Is trust for me is like love. It's when you love someone, you 100% put them in front of you at all times. And if you trust someone, you do the exact same thing. Whether that means you make the right decision, doesn't always. There's another 10 things that probably impact whether that decision's made. But when you inherently and 100% trust someone, you are putting them in front of you at all times first.
Yeah. That exercise is a really good one. Jez, you introduced it to me. I know that. What does it look like when you work with someone you trust and you don't trust? What are the questions? Yeah, that's a really good exercise. What were the questions?
How well do you communicate? How quickly do you get things done? What results do you get? And so if you think of someone you really trust, it's like, communicate really well, get great results. It's done quickly. And then think of someone you don't trust. You don't communicate well, you get poor results, and it takes forever. And so stop thinking about trust as a nice to have. It's actually an economic driver, and that's Stephen Covey actually. So people think about trust as a nice to have, but the truth about it is it takes a lot of time, energy, and money if you don't have it.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question because your Mark's journey is a little bit similar, isn't it? Like as I'm talking to Mark and getting to know Mark, you've both lived and breathed the system. What do you see in Mark? Again, I'm enjoying this one because I'm just giving a few surprise questions. So what do you see in Mark, Em, that reminds you of yourself?
The comment around putting the code into everything. I mean, you couldn't, back in Aussie X days, you couldn't go 5 minutes without someone saying EI, which was extraordinary impact. And it's still a mantra in my head today when I'm under pressure. Right? I still fall back on it because it was so ingrained. So that's the big one. I think the passion towards the work, and that might just be simply because we're a similar kind of personality. So the way you express passion is similar to I in that regard. And I think the other part that came up for me is the belief in it. Like even today, I was with a client, they're 2 months into their first 4-month cycle. And they're like, and they were on the edge, and I just knew to be really confident and just, it's working. I didn't see you for 6 weeks. Your child has grown, you just say, your child's growing, it's getting stronger, it's healthy, just keep going. And I know that when we do a team tune-up in June 15th, I think it might be, they're going to be in a different spot because I've had to go through that nervousness. So when you've got someone in front of you that you were once that person, I think the empathy is really high, and you're able to meet them where they're at. And I think Mark's probably got that experience now, and will really enjoy the journey of being that sort of, I don't know, it's a bit of, you're a bit of a rock for them, and you're just a little bit of certainty in something that's not certain, like moving a zero from one cell to the next cell and adding more money in one instant because you've made a mechanical change to your budget or whatever. That's an instantaneous win, but it's not a sustainable system, right? Our work is building the core muscle that lets the rest of the body run, and the core muscle of culture lets all business activities run faster. So I think, Mark, I see that ability to help teams hold the line, and as Jez says, stick to the process.
But I reckon Em, you brought up a good point, because another reason why you have an external consultant, I get back to one of the early sessions you and I did, and it was the second session we did with this company. And I remember, what were we, an hour and a half, 2 hours in, and there was a little bit of frustration in the room. I think you said to me, let's pull up the conversation we had last time.
Yeah, five months earlier. Yeah.
We went back to what they'd said about their behavior. I remember them looking at the board going, is that the team we were 5 months ago?
That's what we said about ourselves 5 months ago.
They come so far, Murph. It was amazing. But if you don't have someone externally, then we're all involved in this system. And often, Mark, it's the positive stuff, isn't it? Because probably leaders are reasonably good at pointing out the things we don't do right. But I don't think we're good at actually saying, well done, well done, well done.
Keep doing that.
Part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And sort of regular award and recognition. It's not waiting for the quarterly review or the yearly performance review or even a shout out, in front of everyone. It can be something as simple as recognition at the time of something happening. And we know that everything's very timely as well in the corporate space.
Yeah. We had I had a session today, this morning, and through the check-in, someone told one of the primary bosses that they got a shout out from them, and it made the person cry in the other team. It was that impactful. And the leader was like, oh, wow. And he's working on Catch the Good as part of our work. Very smart, very brilliant guy, and just moves on to the next thing really quickly. And it just, And it whacked him right in the face. He's like, wow, it really matters, doesn't it? And I said, mate, it matters a lot. So, yeah, that's a really good point, to catch the good with the specificity, really important, right?
Yeah, 100%. Murph, I'm going to leave the last word to you. What impressed you about Mark, as a leader? Because your connection, as I mentioned at the start, I can ask Mark the question, but, he looks like I don't know him that well, and he looks like a humble dude. But what impressed you about Mark as a leader? Because fundamentally, we love the story, but his ability to lead obviously impressed you in order to come across the PVD.
He's very deliberate and thoughtful. So, when we initially met, so Mark worked, we were working as a consultant, I think, at the very beginning, Mark. And Mark, he was introduced by someone who I trusted. So, I've always been really impressed by how deliberate, thoughtful he is. But then once we started to build the team out, his ability to manage the group and listen to them and identify talent. But as I said earlier, the capacity to develop the values, live the values. So he undersells it a little bit, because the team was actually was over 50. It wasn't, because when you included the athletes, it was quite a big team. So to lead that and to drive that through the whole team, every person in that organisation believed in where we were going. So I think when you've got a leader where everyone's following, it's pretty unique. So I think that were the critical things. But the other thing which I always liked about Mark was his ability to challenge. So if he didn't like something, he'd just ask a question. And I've always valued that in somebody who says, hang on, I'm not sure if that's right. And so, so that's probably, we've never had that conversation, Mark. So I don't know if I answered it to your liking or not.
I'll just pick up on that last point, Jez, because it's a really interesting one. And I think, I told that story about my very first leader when I sort of left university. And I think that whole come to me with a solution as well as a problem is representative of exactly that. It's the willingness to, as you continue to mature, the willingness to continue to challenge, but also know that you've thought about that this could be done better. Whether the rest of the group agrees or not, you don't have to share how you think it can be done better, but it's that ability to challenge, and that's whether that's behaviour or something strategically. But you're right. We talk about what you have to challenge and reward. Excuse me. You have to challenge and reward, and it's a key. Challenge is the big piece. It's the only way you can continue to improve.
Yeah, great. Love
Excellent.
it.
Fantastic Culture Couch Live. Thanks, Mark. Enjoyed a couple of little curveballs in there, which is always good on the slide. But no, it's fantastic, guys. Awesome Culture Couch Live. Thanks, Murph. Thanks, Mark.
Good on you, Rosie. Thanks, Mark. Well done. Thanks, Jez.
Thanks, Em. Thanks, Em. I'm just still getting my head around trust is love, Rosie.
Trust is love.
I like that. Well, I use love too in sales. That was good too. I like that. I think
you do.
We talk about that in feedback as well. Give feedback because you care. And you. I know we've said love someone. Maybe we've got to add love into care as well because we love them.
Yeah. Well, we have. I love working with you in the language when we do peer-to-peer.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Guys, well done.
All right. We'll see you all next week on
Thanks,
the Culture Couch Live.